Hello and welcome everyone to Practical Inclusion for the second week back for 2021. Thank you very much to all of you who commented and shared and got involved with the episode last week with Sky and James. They had a ball and they feel really proud about their new famous celebrity status. So thank you for that. I'd like to start today by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which I broadcast from today, which is the land of the Wadawurrung people, and pay my respect to their elders past, present and emerging. And of course, any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders who are watching us live today or may catch us on the replay on YouTube. My guest, Courtney, whose lands do you broadcast in from today?
I'm here in Naarm, but I'm on Wadawurrung in the East Kulin Nation. So Wurundjeri people here in North Melbourne.
Beautiful, thank you. And I am super excited for a number of reasons to have you on today. One, because I've got really involved in your podcast, Coming Out Black, that you and Matika Little have constructed and have it out on Apple iTunes. Second, because you're a cricketer. And I'm also a mad cricketer and you work at Cricket Australia. And thirdly, because you talk very often about intersectionality and being queer and being Indigenous. And again, something that intersectionality topic that we try to weave through all these practical inclusions, because it's not good enough anymore to do diversity and inclusion with a singular lens and not look more broadly at a whole person. So. Absolutely. Thank you for coming on, and I'd love to start as I usually do and get you to tell a little bit about your story, why you do the work you do, what are some of the achievements that you've made recently that you're quite proud of, or what motivates you and drives you in this inclusion work?
For sure. So, firstly, I'll say I'm a proud Butchulla and Gubbi Gubbi woman, Aboriginal woman. I also have South Sea Island heritage as well that I'm still learning a little bit more about. My grandfather's family were from Lifu Island and brought over as part of the blackbirding, which happened historically in Australia. It's a long story, which I won't go into, but definitely check it out. It's an interesting part of history we still don't talk about. But the reason why I do a lot of work in inclusion, I think, is because growing up, I've always only known my black family, and obviously being quite a light-skinned, experienced First Nations person, I think I've always kind of walked in those two worlds, which has been said a lot, but it's one of those things where it's shown me sort of where a lot of the gaps are in the non-Indigenous community I've also been experiencing, I suppose, through my whole life, what it is to be a First Nations person in Australia, and obviously observing all of the gaps in society and the system in general that's basically from the get-go, from colonisation, it's been set up for people like myself to fail. Being able to get through those things with the guidance of my grandparents and my mum as well, I feel like I have an obligation to not only myself, my family, my mob, but then all Indigenous people as well around me, that, I need to utilise the places that I get to through educational work or experience or culture. So I've always loved cricket. I've always loved sport. And I sort of got this job sort of somewhat kind of by accident, if that makes any sense, but it's kind of weird how things all work out, that it's almost on purpose. So growing up, I played cricket for a while. I wasn't actually that good at all. I quit to play basketball, but at the time I was in year 7. This is a really weird story, but when I was in year 7, I had to draw what I wanted to do when I grew up. I loved cricket. I wasn't very good, but I drew myself in an Australian cricket uniform playing for the women's team. A couple of years later, I quit cricket. And because a girl at my school called me a dyke for playing cricket, and apologies for that word. And I remember just like freaking out and quitting because I obviously wasn't ready to accept my sexuality at the time. I was still working that out, as every person should. And then it only came a few years later when I finished school. I got invited to the Indigenous Championships to play. And that brought me right back into the game and into loving the game. And then from there, I went from sort of not being very skilled, but from there I was able to join, premier clubs and be able to play at a reasonable level for me, which was really cool. So it brought back that whole love of the game. I moved out to the Territory and I was working in sport and rec, which the love of the Territory came from playing in the Indigenous champs, because they are held in Alice Springs every year. So when I finished uni and I had that opportunity to go, I just literally packed up my bags in my car in 2 days and just, necked it out to Tennant Creek, which was really cool. But from there, I sort of moved around a little bit. But when the job came around for working in Cricket Australia, I had sort of a bit of a moral crisis, because I loved where I was. I didn't want to move to Melbourne because I was like, ew, it's a city. But once I got here, I knew that I was like, this is exactly where I need to be and what I want to do. And I always sort of thought these roles were quite tokenistic, looking at people from the outside, seeing organisations that are quite colonial and male driven and male developed. And you sort of look at any kind of sporting institution in Australia, most of the time are quite pale, male and stale, which you hear a lot. I was like, I'm not really sure. But my boss at the time was someone I met who was in the comms team down at the Indigenous Championships prior to that a couple of years ago, and he remembered me from the year before because he interviewed me, which was really cool. Like after the game, I feel like this interview is just me talking about how bad I am at cricket. But anyway, so we were chatting, and he explained like how genuine and authentic their approaches wanted to be and what they really wanted to do. And from there, I didn't even I entertained the first interview, but once I heard that, I was like, this is where I want to be. I want to be able to be the one that pushes people in the right way and also guides this organisation into the right places to do what they want to do. So, from there, I've just been able to get down here to Melbourne and learn some things and be a part of it. An amazingly progressive city. I grew up in the country, and even in Brisbane. And sort of my sexuality was something that I really struggled with in sport, playing basketball, as I was referring to before. It was a bit sort of, I felt very uncomfortable telling anyone. I felt like I was always really hiding myself. And I often tell a story of, having an out teammate, and then when she left the locker room, other teammates would say something like, oh, we can get undressed now, and things like that. So you're sort of in this culture or environment. I know if they knew that I was, they wouldn't have said it, but it's kind of when you get an ear in the place that is like that, you're never comfortable with yourself. And being around that environment, being out in any sort of sport was really difficult, but cricket always seemed to be a really safe space for me to just be exactly who I am. And so I really wanted to be involved in the sport. I really wanted to work in the sport. So now I get to do all those things together, which is really cool. So through my work in cricket, I stumbled across my now co-host, Matika, and I found her blog, which was discussing the intersectionalities of being a light-skinned Indigenous queer woman, which I thought, wow, that's amazing. I thought I was kind of the only one, which is really silly because I know I'm definitely not. But I only know that now. You only know what you know. And it was quite an isolating feeling growing up, thinking that no one else would accept you because there's no one else like you, when in fact there's actually so many of us who exist in these, multiple intersectional categories, which is really, really cool. So we sort of just caught up and just shared what it was like in the places that we were working and existing, and we had shared a lot of war stories about growing up and the way that society is changing around us. I think living in a progressive city like Melbourne and a state like Victoria, I think it's sort of opened up a lot more conversations, but also sort of feeling more comfortable in my own skin to be out. But I know that because of the struggle that I had growing up, struggling with that, I almost owe it to my younger self and then anyone else around me that struggle with that to be even more out and create an environment where people feel comfortable to be who they are, whether it be Black, whether it be gay, or whether it be whatever. So yeah, anyway, and we were having dinner one night, Matika and I, and then I think we had a few drinks. And she said, "Oh, let's start a podcast." And I was like, "Oh, yeah, man, that sounds really cool." And then like 6 months later, she's like, "Okay, so I've set it up. We're doing all this." And I was like, "Oh, okay, you were serious." So yeah, then we started that, and I think we were a bit nervous about putting it out into the world. We recorded it about 6 months before we released it, but it was COVID that sort of got us to sort of just kick it off, and we honestly didn't think anyone would listen to it. And it's been amazing, the feedback we've received and the messages and things that we've been able to engage with and stories we've been able to hear and to share. And to answer your question in a really long way, there's been a lot of things that have contributed to this, but a lot of it has been my own personal journey. But a lot of that's reflective of honestly just wanting to make my grandparents proud. And they're sort of my backbone, and they've never throughout their lives had the opportunity to really engage in education or work in such a flexible arrangement, or work in such an amazingly empowering place that I really hope that can further contribute as much as we can to not only awareness but having some genuine, authentic impact on a lot of societal issues, because we are in a position to have that, utilize that global sphere of influence that we do. And that's also very, what's the word I'm looking for? That's also very replicable in what we're doing in our podcast as well.
Yeah. Oh, thank you for sharing that. It just fills me with joy hearing these stories about people taking, and it is certainly the guests who have been on the shows previously, there's this real theme coming through that a lot do feel a sense of responsibility, that, we do live in these times now, and there is opportunity to do this work and create change. And I just love hearing the stories of so many people who are taking that responsibility on and really doing the amazing things that you're doing and others. It's so empowering to hear, and I'm sure there'll be listeners feeling just as empowered. I have to touch on some of the things that I definitely relate to in your story, and the idea of passing as straight, or being seen as straight in a sporting context, particularly, is definitely a shared experience. And those comments that you hear, as much as those people aren't going to hate you when they come out, they're going to be saying that comments about you. They're going to be waiting for you to leave the change rooms before they get unchanged, or watching whether you're looking when they take their top off. And it absolutely keeps people in the closet. And I don't think that people understand that that's the impact of it. That people should just be who they are anyway. We're not threatening your safety or anything along those lines, but it can be so powerful as a reason to keep people in the closet and not feeling like they can be their true selves.
Absolutely. And given it's, sport's supposed to be this place where everyone is safe to be who they are, it's quite difficult. And I also had the same thing with being Aboriginal, because when I was younger, I didn't really know how to come out black without playing on words, but that was essentially what it was. Sometimes you would be in the middle of class and kids just start cracking Aboriginal jokes, and because it's the majority, how do you say, oh, well, I'm Aboriginal, that offends me, when you're 14 years old and you don't know how to have those conversations. And I really regret not standing up for myself then, but I didn't know how to. And now I would never allow something like that to happen. But society is very different now too. But it's exactly the same thing. Myself being objectively white passing to some people. Sometimes you're in rooms or in situations where you hear what people think about Aboriginal people, and they don't realise that you are. So that's a whole nother sort of basket of eggs, but it's quite similar. You're like, oh wow, I don't even want to tell you that I am, because I don't want to watch you backpedal. And then also, if you feel so comfortable saying that randomly, I couldn't imagine what you actually think. But obviously, that's reflective of how you've grown up, and I totally understand where a lot of people are at in regards to learning about Aboriginal culture and things like that. But it's quite disappointing, being I'm only 25 years old. Quite disappointing what I'm still hearing, which I thought would be something that would have died off 100 years ago, but is still very much actually existing in our world.
Yeah. And I guess probably our first practical inclusion tip for today is never, even if you obviously would prefer that people never made those comments or said those things, but one thing I talk about all the time in the LGBTI inclusion training is assume that you're talking to people who could be in the closet. And I guess that translates just as much to people who could be Indigenous or have invisible disability or whatever it may be. You should always speak your most inclusive way, because you don't know who's listening and what impact it's having, regardless of where your beliefs or position lies.
Absolutely. And if I can even jump in on that as well, I think when it comes to jokes as well, this is one that I hear a lot, it's just a joke and things like that. But, you can be funny without being mean to a demographic, like, just because you don't belong to that demographic. And even there's a lot of people that I know, and myself included when I was younger, people that make fun of themselves in their own demographic, like, if that makes any sense, like, people that are gay making gay jokes, you're like, yeah, well, that's self-deprecating to you and you think that's funny, but that's actually really offensive to me, or vice versa. There's plenty that we can laugh about that doesn't have to be about someone's existence. It's just like making fun of someone's nose, like even if they're, it's just we can be better. Like, it's really not that hard. Yeah,
exactly. No, totally with you on that. All right, let's move on to some of these questions that I had.
Yes.
I'm interested, and I'm sure many listeners will be interested. There was obviously chaos across social media on Tuesday. And certainly for my friends and family and people that I interacted with on that day, the conversations were all about Australia Day, what it means, what the date means, what the protests are about, which of course is this wonderful thing, that people are talking about it. But also I am continually baffled by the responses that people have from a position of really little to no conversation with Indigenous folk at all, which really continues to surprise me. And I certainly don't know anywhere near enough about this particular issue and about colonisation, and I'm trying to learn as rapidly as I can, but it really surprises me that so many people are prepared to talk on this topic without education, and without really understanding it. I guess what I'm interested to hear from you is, what are your thoughts and takeaways from what transpired across Tuesday, and how are you feeling from that now, a couple of days later? What kind of impact does it have?
Yeah, well, I will explain Australia Day as, we've gone on Christmas break, we've had New Year's, it's exciting, it's like brushing your teeth before the start of the day, you feel super refreshed. But then they changed the debate topic is like drinking orange juice straight away after brushing your teeth. You get this like disgusting flavour in your mouth, and you usually probably feel a bit sick. So, and that's been the way. This has been a public holiday most of my life now. It only officially became a public holiday in 1994 nationally. So people of my background, my generation, all only know Australia Day to be as Jan 26. However, that change the date debate has been every year that I can remember. And people just have never really understood it. And the older I'm getting, and obviously I know a lot of the history behind it, not due to any help from anything that I studied at university or school. That was on my own research and doing, and from my family helping me understand what this is all about, and my community as well. So I suppose I see people that don't understand it yet. I see it as misinformed and uneducated in this place. But there's also a very large amount of ignorance, I feel, towards this topic, because it's a lot easier to just keep going with the flow. And I also take notice of the rhetoric that's been in the media for so long, not only just about Jan 26, but it's also about Aboriginal people. You sort of go back 10, 20 years and you read articles about Aboriginal people and things like that, and they're painting, my people as these, like, unhuman species sometimes. And, my grandparents weren't treated very well. My mum was only born 3 years after the referendum for Aboriginal people to have rights. Like, 3 years later, she was born. And that didn't mean that discrimination or racism finished then. Or there's anything that, has happened ever since then, solves, like, the massive societal issues that we have as a product of colonisation. So when it comes to Jan 26, it gets looked at like it's this massive debate that people with, like you were saying before, with no education can just have a free opportunity to just tee off about it, which I don't understand, because, I would never just randomly start teeing off about, farming, for example, and that farmers should get X, Y, and Z. Like, it's not my area of expertise. Understandably, it's a national public holiday, and as citizens of Australia, we should have the right to have our say in it, but that should also go the other way. We should have the right to provide education to everyone about what truly happened on this day. And I think seeing stuff around media, anytime you look at the comment section about anything posting about this, it turns into troll city, and that does come from people that, the only education that they know is what they're being told. So I sort of look back out at this as, we're talking about years ago, like, decades ago, people were receiving that, white Australia policy media. They pass those views down to their parents, their kids, and then those kids become parents to the next kids, etc., etc. Media hasn't been balanced for a really long time, I think, as well. So people aren't reading media that's making any sort of sense of that there's actually a really valid, important reason why Aboriginal people don't want to celebrate on this day, and that's extremely offensive. Then people also just don't know. However, I feel like we're at a point in time where the internet exists. We have so much literature, academics, books, music, everything. We have so much information out there that people can access to understand the weight of how horrific and almost dehumanizing, and, like, this is obviously my own personal view, and how cruel it is to celebrate a day that just was such an instigator of genocide, rape, dispossession. It just baffles me that we're so comfortable with just agreeing to disagree on this topic. So for myself and a lot of my community, I also don't speak for them either, but for a lot of people around me, this is the most fatiguing month of the year. I sort of hold my breath from Jan 1 until the 26th, and I was explaining this to a friend today. I feel like I'm in the new year now, like I'm refreshed because it's done. Because people that don't belong to our community, and people that feel like they can just utilize the opportunity to just tee off about their views about a demographic as well, which has nothing to even do with the day, as well, because it's just a strange thing that happens, and I don't think we would do that necessarily as much for any other demographic in Australia to this degree. It's just a strange thing. This was a topic that used to be used as a debate topic when I was in high school, which is a really strange thing. And I remember one year I had to go on the against team for the debate, and I had to do it for a grade, so I had to stand there as part of my assignment, and try to argue against changing the debate, which I did not fundamentally believe at all, but my teacher made me do it. I said, well, I don't feel comfortable with this, I'm Aboriginal. And it was quite a heartbreaking sort of thing I had to do, but how cruel. Like, it's just such a strange concept.
And as you say, you're only 25, that's not that long ago.
Exactly, yeah. And, you know, I didn't learn anything about my own culture at school either. And I went to a good school. You know, and it's no fault to anyone, but, you know, it's obviously a bigger picture with the system that we're in. But it's very disappointing. But when you look at, like, I've recently sort of educated a few of my friends on some other deeper things, because people don't realise that James Cook didn't even come here. Like, he discovered it, but he actually didn't put the flag down on Jan 26. And, you know, a lot of the day of mourning discussion was on Jan 26 in 1938, which was a time when these Aboriginal men around Redfern were taken, got kept at the police station overnight, so for a couple of days, told if they weren't a part of this reenactment of the First Fleet, that their family would starve, and they were literally just taken off the street and told that they had to play this role as retreating Aborigines, which is so strange and cruel. And there were also, I think there was 100 protesters there that were all Aboriginal and some Aboriginal allies, and that marked that day of mourning. So that's been an ongoing protest since 1938, and it is 2021, and we're still saying, no, we're actually just going to get really drunk on a public holiday. And it's such a strange thing when people don't really understand the history of it. And I think it really the more that you learn about it, the more guilty I think a lot of people do feel. But there's also this argument that, well, it was our ancestors, it's not our fault. But I think it's kind of like, yeah, but this is how you can learn. Like, we can use this opportunity as a country to utilize this day as a day of mourning, learn about the history, so then we can move forward, because we're struggling with this as a society in general. There's so much preconceived false information that exists because of the media back then, and this false rhetoric has been going through generations, that this generation is working so hard to stop that cycle, to actually look into the history and be like, oh wow, that's actually incredibly cruel. Even though it's not my fault specifically, I have a responsibility of some form to be part of this new world that we want to be in. You know, if we want to be a united country, that has to come with that hard truth telling, and that's got to come from any leadership in any organization. It doesn't have to necessarily be eventually it will have to be government, but it comes from just, working in your own family, breaking down those preconceived constructs, and that's bigger than just First Nations issues. That's broader as well. We look at the White Australia policy; it still exists today. It's just a different.
I think what you say there about, sorry to interrupt you there, but what you say about, it's my ancestors, it's not me. Well, they're not here now. I am.
Exactly.
And so I have responsibility to try and stop the impacts that are still clearly reverberating on a daily basis. That's a role that we can play, those who are of us are here now.
Absolutely. And I think if we look at how much better society, functions in general, if we're just nice to each other, like, why would we all want to live in a world that's like super hateful and we don't want that. Like, surely any average ordinary Australian, black or white, no matter what your persuasion is, no one wants to live in a world where people are angry at each other. Like, education is absolute power in this space, and we are really in a good position now to really just put in the hard yards, have that hard truth telling, so then we can heal, and we can also, keep making steps to equity. It's not even equality, like, it's equity that needs to happen, and understanding why things are the way that they are. They don't just exist like this. And colonization still has super damaging impacts today. It doesn't matter how long ago it was. People just don't understand that the system really does benefit people that aren't of colour or of different background, and to some degree of different, sexuality and different, cultures in this country. So recognising that doesn't take away respect. Like, providing respect doesn't take respect from other people. I think that's kind of what's big sometimes for some people.
Yeah, I really like that. And I like the message of hope there that you've kind of, you know, given to us there, that, you know, this is a new age and it doesn't have to be all fighting and arguing and bickering. It can be a positive step forward. Yeah, I really like that. Now, we have run out of time really quickly. I'm amazed because it's just been so wonderful listening to you. I'm thinking that if you are at all willing, I might like to get you back sometime and we can spend the same amount of time talking about sport, because I'd love to do that with you as well, because you have such a vast knowledge in that space. And I think there's lots that listeners can take from it. Thank you so much for coming on today and giving us your time and talking about that topic, which, as you say, is something, you know, that you've clearly expressed is really difficult, and that now it is your new year. And so, you know, apologies for bringing you back in that a couple of days later, but I really appreciate you sharing that with us, and I think many people will get a lot out of that. Yes, please jump on and listen to the podcast. It's very clear to me why both you and Matika ended up on Out for Australia's 30 under 30 list. For those who aren't aware, it's a list that recognises people who are under 30 years of age who are doing amazing stuff in the queer advocacy space. And I think it's just such an honour for you to receive, but clearly so well deserved to both of you. So congratulations on that. And I will hope to get you back.
Thank you very much, and thank you for utilising your platform to bring in different voices. And I really look forward to seeing this episode, and probably looking forward to doing a part 2 as well.
Awesome. All right, thank you very much, and thanks everybody for listening. You will be able to catch this on YouTube probably later tonight or tomorrow, where it will have the captions. So if you're wanting to share, please wait and share that with the captions, so as many people can listen to it as possible. And we will see you next week with another guest, and I look forward to that. So enjoy your weekends.
Thank you.